Hi, and welcome to another episode of Missy Away. I'm so excited you're here today, and we happen to be unpacking all things allergies. And what does that mean? What can you do about it? How do you know if you have an allergy, a sensitivity, an intolerance? What do all these definitions mean? How can we be on the lookout for them? And then what can we do about it? These are all the topics and things I want to uncover today as we start walking through what all of this can look like and what it means in your life. So hang on as we dive into all things allergies and let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and I'll be happy to answer those as I can. Hey, I wanted to stop here really quick just as a disclaimer to say that all of the information that I am sharing here in this episode, as well as across this channel, is meant for educational purposes. It is not medical advice and should not be misconstrued or adopted in place of medical advice from your healthcare provider or seen as a diagnosis or treatment option or anything like that. Definitely consult with your medical professional to figure out what makes sense for you. You definitely want to make sure that you're making the right decision for all of the other things that are considered when it comes to you and your health.
So, what is an allergy? Well, according to the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, an allergy by definition is an IgE mediated response from your immune system. Well, what the heck is an IgE? IgE stands for immunoglobulin E. And what that is an antibody that all of us have in our system, typically found at low levels. But when these antibodies find or detect what they think is a foreign substance, and it may or may not actually be a foreign substance in the case of an allergy, example being eggs, milk, pollen, like you name it there, but it triggers the immune system. So they attach to mast cells, trigger the immune system, and that immune system then releases chemicals, histamine and other things from the various cells to try to get rid of the substance. These type of allergies can be very scary and they can come on very suddenly and very fast. It's not something to be taken lightly and definitely something that you want to consult professionals to help you with should you ever encounter it with yourself or your child. Saying that, with IgE mediated responses, things to look for would include hives, breathing difficulties, tremendous stomach upset, maybe even vomiting. You could have eczema, you could have throat closing up, swelling, like a lot of different things. And it's not something that you just want to ignore or think, oh gosh, that was scary. I don't ever want to deal with that again, and just brush it off. To combat those types of reactions, you typically have to have a substance called epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, and we have an EpiPen that many people have to carry around should they ever have a reaction like that. They come into contact with something, whether again that be a food or something in their environment that's triggering it. But the interesting thing is that while IgE mediated responses are scary and can be very severe and potentially life threatening, there's another thing that our body will do called a food sensitivity or intolerance that can make you feel really miserable. But the key thing to remember is that it typically is not a life-threatening response. So it's interesting. If you go online and read about food sensitivities and or intolerances, some actually take these terms and use them interchangeably. Some distinguish them out, and some have conflicting information as to exactly what that is. But the biggest takeaway to know about a food sensitivity and or intolerance is that it's typically held or happens in the digestive system, can result in tummy upset, diarrhea, bloating. Sometimes it can result in fatigue or brain fog, those kind of things, but it's typically not a life-threatening response. Does it make you miserable? Is it something you should absolutely look at? Of course, because what's really interesting is that if you do address these foods and you end up taking them out of your diet or modifying them some way or figuring out a way to heal your gut from the inside out so you can start tolerating these foods, that can be a real game changer for both yourself and your family.
How do you figure out whether you or your child has a food sensitivity or a food allergy, either one? Well, there's a few different ways to go about doing that. And I want to talk about some of those options for you and then figure out how do you solve this from the inside out. One of the first things that I typically will suggest to people is if you start noticing that you're having all these unexplained symptoms and you're like, gosh, I'm constantly tired, or I constantly have this bloating, or my digestion is just off, or I'm having eczema pop up on my skin and I don't know why. Start keeping a food journal. So, what is a food journal? Food journal is a document that you keep. It's like a running list of all of the different foods that you eat all throughout the day. And you typically will carry this on for a couple of weeks at a time. When you write down your food, write down the time. So, like maybe let's say breakfast, for example, and you want to say like 7 o'clock in the morning, I had eggs, toast, some grits, and a piece of fruit. Great. Write all of those things down, and then write down if you have any kind of reaction to them. Maybe you get really tired 30 minutes afterwards, or maybe you start feeling like you're congested and you just have a little bit of postnasal drip, which results in throat clearing or coughing chronically. Maybe your stomach becomes upset, or if you notice these patterns, like this is what I want you to start to write down. And do this for everything that you eat throughout the day. This includes snacks. This includes just, oh, I'm going to borrow this from my friend because this looks good on their lunch. Or something is at the office or something is at school that you think, oh, that looks yummy. And you just happen to grab something on the way off to your next appointment. Or maybe it's a piece of candy or something that you have like just sitting around that you just casually pop in your mouth. Or maybe it's when you go out to a concert, an outdoor concert, and you come back home and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't breathe. I feel so fatigued. Like, what is going on? These are the things that I want you to write down. And after about a week to 2 weeks, I want you to go back and look at this food journal, and I want you to read through all of the different foods, and I want you to note any reactions that you had. And this can even be like hours after you've had the foods too, or sometimes even days. There is such a thing as a delayed reaction to foods and to different contact things that we come in contact with every day. So definitely just make note of any kind of abnormal symptom or thing that you just feel uncomfortable, you feel like something is off. All definitely worth noting. Once you have this journal and you start seeing any kind of similar patterns, I want you to see what you can do about either, you have options here, I guess. You can either maybe eliminate some of those things out of your diet, avoid those topical things that you're putting on your skin. Maybe see if you wear a mask outside, if that helps during this wonderful pollen season that we're all having. Figure out where you find the differences and see if you start to note the patterns and start to connect the dots that way. The next thing that you can do is you can also look at seeing an allergist. So, what these allergists will do, especially if you have this food journal in place, it'll give them some really great data to go from to figure out and connect some of these dots for you, especially if you're having trouble seeing different patterns and symptoms. But typically, what they will do is they will do an allergy test type of scenario. And there's 3 different types of tests that they can do. They can do a blood test, which is where they literally draw blood from your arm and then they send it off to a lab, and then they determine different foods that or different air allergens that they want to run your blood through to see how your different IgE responders react. That's important to know. This allergy testing will not determine food sensitivities. That's not how it works. So, if you do have a food sensitivity, just know that allergy testing from a traditional allergy office will not show up as having an allergen to something. But they can do blood tests, which again will figure out how your blood reacts to different substances that it comes in contact with. They can also do something called a skin test or a prick test. And this is where they take like a grid and they have these little uh, sticky or stick things, I guess, if you will, that they push into your back. It doesn't draw any blood or anything, but it does push the substance just under the first couple of layers of skin to determine if there will be a histamine reaction. They will also have a control histamine to determine like how your body typically reacts to a histamine, and then measure all of your different responses against that one histamine reaction. That's how they determine if your body is having an adverse reaction. Again, this is an IgE mediated response test, meaning if you have a sensitivity, an IgG response, or any other kind of immune response, because there are several, it will not detect those. It will only detect your IgE responses. So they measure them. Then you get a chart of saying, okay, X, Y, Z, these are the things you're allergic to, these are the things you're not allergic to, and then they go from there. And then they can also do something called a patch test, and this is for delayed reactions. So what they do is they have these tiny little discs, I mean, maybe the size of like an eraser head, essentially, from a pencil, maybe a slight bit bigger than that. And they literally put like the substance on the disc and then they tape it to your back and they leave it there for 48 hours. And what they do, you're not allowed to bathe with it, you're not allowed to touch it, you can't take it off, nothing. You have to just leave it there for 48 hours. And after that period of time, they will have either you at home or you go in the office and they do this. They will peel it off of your skin and then they will determine, is there any kind of reaction going on from any of the discs that we had on your back? Not the most pleasant experience for any one of these three tests, but they all will sometimes spin different results. And so here's my caution to you about allergy testing. It is a tool. It is information. And it's great to have, but don't depend on it for being gospel truth. And here's why. All three of these tests can give you false positives and they can give you false negatives. Again, it's a tool, it's information, it's great to have just as something to file away and to keep in mind, but they are not 100% accurate all the time. Saying that, they are one of the best measures that we have for an IgE type of reaction. So if you are allergic to dogs or cats or peanuts or something like that, they can be great tools to determine, okay, that hive is huge. You need to carry an EpiPen to make sure that if you were to come into contact with one of these substances that has such a negative reaction in your body, that then you can counter it with epinephrine so that you don't go into anaphylactic shock or something worse. That's super important. But what's also hard is knowing that it may swing one way or the other, just depending on how the test is run and how your body's responding that specific day. So, again, word to caution, use them as tools, use them as information. They're important and we have them for reasons, but don't use them as complete gospel truth if you feel like something is a little off or wow, I've never reacted to that before and it's showing that I'm allergic to whatever. So, like, just use that with caution and also elicit the advice of your allergist and your team there so that they can guide you along that way as opposed to just rashly making a decision that could negatively impact your health. We don't want any of that. And your allergist will be the greatest person to help you with those IgE reactions. Saying that, if we look at IgG reactions, how do you determine whether or not you have that going on? Well, that's where we go back to the food journal. And if you are constantly documenting and determining where your reactions are happening and starting to link patterns to that, it can be a really great and resourceful tool for you to have in your back pocket of saying, pretty sure I react to this one. The easiest way that we have found in order to figure out these IgG reactions is simply to remove the food or remove the substance that we are coming in contact with. We have found this to be true with soaps on our hands. Sometimes we will get like almost psoriasis type rashes or just rawness on hands because of different chemicals that are found in everyday soaps that you can pick up off the shelf at Walmart or Target. I cannot emphasize enough that you have to learn how to read ingredients to know what some of these harmful substances are so that you can start to avoid them and be sure that you're putting good things on your skin, good things in your body, and good things in the air that you breathe as well. Fragrances are one of the top allergens for so many people, and they can be found in everything these days. Fragrances can be found in candles, they can be found in lotions, shampoos, perfumes, gosh, even like laundry detergent. I can't walk down the laundry aisle anymore because we've been away from it for so long without getting a headache because it is unbelievably strong when I walk down that aisle at any grocery store. I literally hold my breath. But that's what happens when you remove yourself from these chemicals and these everyday irritants, is when you come in contact with them again, the response can be pretty big. But my whole thing is, what can we do about it? If you find that you are having a food intolerance or that you are having some kind of environmental intolerance, removing that piece from your body, leaving it out for a period of time. I mean, this can be several days to several weeks. Usually it takes about 6 weeks for something to completely leave your body. Sometimes you can get it out in a couple weeks, but for a safe measure, usually about 6 weeks is a good rule of thumb for that, especially when it comes to foods and like wheat, for example. If you feel like you have a wheat intolerance, getting wheat out of your diet for about 6 weeks at a time and then slowly reintroducing it may be a good way to try that. But again, these are for ones that we are reactions that we are not anaphylactic to. I don't recommend doing something like that. Um, and simply working with your allergist and medical professionals to make sure that you are doing something safe, because the last thing that you would want to do is try to self-diagnose on a lot of these things and then end up in a very dangerous spot. No, we definitely don't want that. Work with your medical team on those kind of things. And then with the IgG responses, with the food sensitivities and tolerances, that kind of thing, if you slowly work to reintroduce these foods and you notice that these symptoms reappear, chances are you do have a sensitivity to that food. Great way to work and figure out for sure if you do, find a naturopath. That's a fancy term for a doctor, someone in the medical professional world who has a more holistic approach to medicine. There are different tests and different things that you can look at to determine IgG results. There's mixed results on whether or not they're as accurate. We personally found that one of those tests was very helpful for us and our family in figuring out foods that were aggravating my son's system. But that doesn't mean that it will throw perfect results for you every single time. And that's what I always had to keep in mind, even for myself. And while I found it to be helpful, same as the IgG or IgE test, my IgG tests that I took, I had to make sure to remember, okay, it's information, but it's not gospel truth, knowing that it could throw me false positives and false negatives. But it did give me something to go by, which was better than just guessing and hoping for the best. When you start to remove foods, just know that there can be some ramifications mentally with all of this. And not to say it's like a physical reaction or whatever. I know from a psychological perspective that it can be really difficult when you start taking foods in and out. You start to think, my gosh, I can't eat anything. You start to get really frustrated. Sometimes you can get really sad. I know with my own children, it has been uphill battle at times. It really and truly has. And so we have had to find ways to avert our attention to not focus on that. We have had to see if we can find substitutes. We have had to see if we can figure out ways to take our minds off of it while we are grieving the fact that we can't have some of our favorite things anymore. But I keep in mind, eye on the prize is I'm trying to get us to be in a better place so that we feel better, so that we live better, so we don't have pain anymore, the eczema goes away, all of the things, and that we are thriving and living our best lives. But we didn't do it overnight. We did it with baby steps. So that is the third thing that I encourage you to do. Between journaling, between getting in with medical professionals and figuring out exactly what your triggers are and all of that, third thing I would recommend is that you take baby steps, one change at a time, for a couple different reasons. One reason would be that we don't want to overwhelm our system. Like, it's a lot when you're trying to do everything at once, and it can be really, really overwhelming. Second reason is it can be really difficult to track. If you take all of these things out at the same time, which one made the difference if you have a positive result from it? We don't know. So if you go slow, take one small thing at a time, it's much more manageable and it's a whole lot easier to track. So I encourage you to do that, and also so that you can stick with it. Sometimes it can be really easy to say, oh, I'll just cheat a little bit and see how I do. And then you're like, oh, I regret that. Nobody wants that, and especially if it's an IgE reaction where you're having like episodes of hives and all that. That can get really scary really fast and can be downright dangerous. So you don't want to cheat on anything when you're trying to figure out your allergens and what path of action to take. When looking at allergies, these are the things that I would look for. I would look to determine, are you having an IgE reaction, meaning that you have the hives, the breathing issues, the fatigue, like immense fatigue, like within 30 minutes of eating that food, possibly a delayed response, but it could be a couple hours. But I would look for all of those kind of things first. And if you're having a sensitivity, looking for your eczema, looking for bloating, fatigue, being tired, like chronic fatigue that you just feel like you don't have any energy, brain fog, like all of those kind of things. And I would figure out how I want to approach it in food journaling, getting with medical professionals, and then also taking baby steps one little thing at a time. I hope this episode has been helpful for you. Please let me know what kind of questions you have. Feel free to download my allergy swap guide below if you have food intolerances or food allergies that you need to address. This guide can be a quick go to of figuring out, okay, if I can't do milk, what else can I do? Happy to help in any way I can. I'd love to answer your questions. Let me know if this episode was helpful. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel below. Share this with a friend. I would love to get the word out there and bring more education to this side of the holistic community. Until next time.